There we go. So welcome everybody. Thanks again for taking the time. First, the logistics of today's meeting. The bathrooms are to your right. Just kidding. I'm really glad to have our partners here with us doing a presentation of our partners, Steve and Colin. I'm going to introduce in a minute from Threatlocker. I'm going to let them tell you all about that. I'm going to share my screen here for a brief intro. This is a real pleasure for me for a number of reasons, one of which is I'm not the person that's going to be talking the whole time. Steve and Colin are going to do that part. But really, I'm really excited about this technology. You know, we're in for about 300 seats right now. I'm really hoping we're going to get around 800 seats deployed between now and the end of the year, because this is the new technology. This is the state of the art in protection against the cybersecurity threats that are out there. So with that, can everybody see my screen okay? Steve, give me a thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
Here we go. Zero trust cybersecurity. Got to click the little button here to page down. There we go. And I joke with people. It's like, what if everything we knew about security is wrong? You know, we always talk about multi-layered approach and the perimeter and the endpoint and intrusion detection and intrusion prevention. But what if we were to take kind of the opposite approach? That's what today is really about. So here's the problem. You know, most firms today have exposure to cybersecurity issues. People are really starting to open their eyes now. There's security tools and protections are not in place for most businesses. Many firms don't have a disaster recovery plan. They need to make sure their PII, personal identifiable information, and their PHI, personal health information, if they have any, is properly secure. And I can't stress this enough. Businesses need cybersecurity insurance, period. Okay, that's a whole nother presentation, but if you don't have it, please do yourself a favor and get cybersecurity insurance. So, number one, things have changed drastically in the past couple of years. 2020 and 2021, you know, everybody has seen it. You know, things like in our own marketplace, the hospital being breached. It was cost them, I think, $1.5 million per day when they were breached. So it's opening people's eyes. But people have the wrong conception that it's only the big businesses. It's all businesses. As I say, we're in this together. We all have to take it seriously. The last note here is that not all IT service providers are equal, and this may sound crazy, but some may actually put you at greater risk than if you were doing it yourself. Why? Because the criminals and the hackers are out there trying to gain data. They know that IT people have the keys to the kingdom. So if they find a small IT shop that doesn't have the correct approach, the correct governance, that's an opportunity for them to hack larger customers. So Rose Computers, you know, we've been at this for over 24 years. I founded this in 1997. Over on the left-hand side here, you see our core values: culture, community, learning, responsibility. We're currently 11 people, but we're supported by over 1,000 engineers through our contract relationships. I like to tell people we're the small organization that you can walk in and talk to the owner, and we have the breadth of a larger organization than anybody else in our marketplace. Microsoft Silver, Sophos Gold, and most importantly, we've taken the steps for accreditation. Nobody else in the state of Vermont has done this now to earn the CompTIA Security Trust Mark Plus. This is significant. I'm proud of this accomplishment. The CompTIA Security Trust Mark Plus signifies that Rose Computer Technology Services adheres to our industry's highest standards for security practices and business processes in critical components of identification, protection, detection, response, and recovery as related to data security. Earning a Security Trust Mark Plus demonstrates a true commitment to address the challenges of security compliance facing our industry today. Now, and I'm not claiming that we are vastly superior to all the competition in Vermont, but nobody else has spent the money and gone through to get this accreditation. And it's important. It's not something that you can get easily. So a little bit about me, very briefly. Like I said, I've been doing this for over 34 years. I founded it in 97. I served in the Service Delivery Council for what's now ConnectWise for 4 years. We all give back to the community. I've done the Sleep Out for 7 years in a row. We support COTS and Spectrum locally. Nabil is our Chief Technology Officer. He was trained in network security with the US Army, and he was the primary engineer for the state of Vermont Department of Public Safety Network. He's fantastic. And Shannon, I'm not sure if he made it with us today. He may be out on calls, but he's a newer addition to our team. He comes from an insurance background. He's worked with Fortune 100 certain insurance carriers, so he understands risk and how to talk about risk, which is what cybersecurity is really becoming. It's about risk management. So that's it. That's the introduction. So let's jump right into it. Zero trust approach. Block everything with Threatlocker. Steve Berry and Colin Ellis, excuse me. Steve, take it away.
All right, if I can go ahead and grab a hold of the screen.
You should be allowed to now.
All right, let me give this a shot. Okay. If everyone can see my screen, I'm going to start off, and thank you for being here. I'm Steve Berry. I'm the Senior Regional Sales Manager. We've got Colin Ellis with us too. He's one of Threatlocker's top engineers. He's going to be walking us through the portal today. We're going to answer your questions, but I wanted to start off by a powerful statement. There's got to be a better way. And you see right here, the NSA and Microsoft are both pushing the enterprise. That means you to adopt a zero trust approach. And if you see, I highlighted the paragraph down here at the bottom. You can read that for yourself. But what it says is a more efficient way for enterprises to defend against today's increasingly sophisticated threats, right? So we know there's got to be a better way. Sorry, gentlemen, ladies. And they're issued guidance on this, right? I mean, the NSA is issuing guidance to our enterprises of America, the private companies of America. It's a dire situation. I want you to keep in mind, there's something that's important to recall about all of the hacks that you've heard about recently, the pipeline hack, SolarWinds, all these things. They had threat hunters deployed, multiple threat hunters, and probably really, really good ones, and they still failed. So I just ask you, what's different about what's in your security stack right now that's protecting your business that's different than them? Well, zero trust is the way. It's the future, right? So if I can jump in, share my screen. Sorry about this. Apologize. There we go. Okay, so Threatlocker, policy-driven endpoint protection, right? What we do, application whitelisting, ring fencing, storage control. Those are our 3 layers, right? 3 layers that we're going to talk about. Application whitelisting. You may have heard it called zero trust, also default deny. That's where most vendors stop. If something should slide onto the endpoint, it's completely relied upon your antivirus at that part. Well, that's where our ring fencing technology comes in. It's how we kill ransomware. Colin's going to show you how that works, answer your questions on that. And of course, storage control. Now, this is the last line of defense. We take the same approach. Not everybody should be able to access all of your network shares, your network storage, your backup shares. Certainly, you need to control that USB. I call it USB bleed, right? Whether it's an insider threat or an application that's trying to exfiltrate the data, locking down the USB drives with granular control is how you're going to be able to do that. And we're going to show you how that service works. We have elevation for admin rights, but that really doesn't apply so much. It's a convenience play. So if someone needs an application, that user would have the ability to do the installation themselves. No need to grab other resources. So just about us, that's what we are. We're based in Orlando, Florida. Most of the organization is throughout Central Florida. We have resources throughout the entire globe. Sorry about this. So block by default, you probably heard that. Instead of saying, let's let everything run and try and determine if something is malicious, let's only allow those applications that are necessary for your employees to perform their business functions and nothing else runs. By doing so, you dramatically reduce that surface area of attack. That's the future of cybersecurity. The problem has always been cost and complexity, right? Managing those applications that are on your whitelist has been a Herculean effort to stay on top of. Well, Threatlocker has almost 450 applications, what we call our built-in list. And this is a real differentiator for us, that if any of your applications are on that list, the responsibility of patching, maintaining, updating falls upon us. So your users who need an application have access to it on Friday. It updates on Sunday evening. They walk in on Monday. if it's on that list, it's going to be updated, ready to go. Now, business line of business applications, custom apps, they can be pulled into the whitelist, and we can future-proof those too. We can deal with it. But the offloading of that heavy lifting is really, really integral as far as deploying this. Historically, couldn't happen. And I mentioned ring fencing. Sorry, guys, I get buttoned down here. Ring fencing. Ring fencing is our technology, and was created by our CEO, who said, you know what? I see something that's happening here. All of the attacks seem to be, all the ransomware attacks seem to be running to PowerShell, CScript, RedServe, Run DLL, those core Windows tools that are necessary for it to function properly, but are currently being weaponized, right? They're getting onto the endpoint where they've got a preloaded command. It goes right to PowerShell. It says, go out to this particular URL, download my weaponized payload, and now I begin to encrypt. Well, what if we control PowerShell? What if we don't let PowerShell function that way? It can't go there. Maybe we only allow it to go to a certain website that we dictate, that you dictate, that's necessary and nothing else. By doing so, you cut off ransomware. I want to highlight here, Threatlocker has never been compromised, not yet, not to date, with when an endpoint has been fully locked down. It just hasn't happened. They haven't figured this out yet. This is a differentiator. Storage control. I'd just like to ask a theoretical question. Would it be valuable to you if you saw in real world who was accessing your network shares, those honey holes of client data that's important, whether it's social security numbers, billing statements, whatever it may be, that you need to make sure doesn't get encrypted, doesn't get pushed to the dark web? Well, this is where storage control comes in. We give you a 30-day running audit log with this. And this just says, these users, this application are allowed to access these particular network share locations, right? To me, that's a bank vault. Just because there's a teller at the front end doesn't mean that they get to walk to the back, go into the vault where the cash and the gold are and play around and no one know about it. Right now, there aren't a lot of solutions that let you control that with the visibility. We do that. You get to dictate who has access to those locations and only. Now, they can request permission. You can set it up as such. And of course, USB, very important for compliance. We have granular control of that. Encryption, yes. Serial number drive, yes. Only the CEO or C-suite are allowed to, absolutely. Whatever policies you want, we can help create. And by doing so, you're really reducing that surface area of attack. And this full detail audit log that I mentioned, I wanted to just reiterate. So if someone does access, let's say they have rights, of course, and they start to move, copy, delete a file, you know exactly what they've done. Timestamp, what application they utilized, all of the necessary forensic information that you'll need at your fingertips. Something as benign as, hey, I lost a folder. Actually, you drag and dropped it into another location. I can see it, I find it, I know what backup to hit. Or more maliciously is to stop that insider threat, someone walking away, and certainly applications trying to access those locations. We have it on camera, if you will. I call it the eye in the sky that never lies. That's because of my background in sports, right? This is a little bit of what we do collectively. You probably see some things. Stop zero-day ransomware. I imagine that's what we're all here for, right? We got to stop these things in their tracks. I don't think you're going to find a solution that is more robust, scalable, granular, and powerful as Threatlocker. So with that, I want to get out of the way a little bit. I want to show you the portal. I want Colin to walk us through what it's like once the agents are loaded. By the way, we have a very light footprint, right? First of all, very light. You won't even feel us. We go in at the kernel level. We rest for about 7 days and collect baseline data. Colin's going to pick it up from that agent. Those agents are deployed. And now we've got a list of applications that's been accessed, all of them in that period of time, which in and of itself is additional visibility for you. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. I'm going to allow Colin to jump in here and share his screen, and we're going to walk through it.
Thanks a lot.
Starting with the application piece.
Thanks a lot, Steve. And let me just jump in for 1 second.
Yes.
I posted, I did not mention to everybody, but I posted in the chat, in the Zoom chat, you know, if you have questions, just go ahead and post them in there. So we'll have time to get to them at the end of the presentation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Awesome. And just making sure the resolution is okay for you guys. Is it showing well on your screen?
It is for me, Colin.
Perfect. And we'll start right from there. So the goal team is to make sure that we can lock down those environments without causing any unnecessary friction. The visibility that we mentioned is really the beginning of that. Because like Steve said, absolutely everything that happens in the environment we can see. So to give you an idea of what that looks like, this is what we call the unified audit. And forensically, for many different reasons, whether it's for dealing with a bad employee, troubleshooting issues, this audit answers a lot of questions. And to give you a great example of that, we'll see something like Microsoft Office running inside my environment. Any of these files, from a visibility standpoint, we get to see if they're signed, what hashes they have, and what's actually happening, what files are touching other portions of the system. So this is the visibility that we leverage to help define the whitelist. If we can see everything taking place, you'll notice we get to build policies for every piece of software, every application on those machines. And this is where the usability comes in. Steve is coining our built-in policies. And what that does for us automatically is upon deployment, we get to validate the integrity of the software installed. If those policies match what we call a threat locker built in, then you can rest assured our team has already addressed that software, its updates, and its changes automatically. So upon those agents being deployed, you really have a nice understanding of what software is installed and what your users actually need. So we get to go through that process of making sure this list is vetted, and then we secure the endpoints. But the biggest question comes down to, well, what does that mean to the end user? So in this case, myself, Steve, and David will be able to account for everything your team needs from a software perspective. And what we see a lot recently in any type of attack is something as simple as this: remote access tools that your front desk technician, anyone who is susceptible in the environment, is going to have the opportunity to install software. But it's like we were mentioning, we've already determined what's necessary. So if a random remote access tool attempts to execute, the end result is it being blocked because it's not on our approved list of applications. But what we strive for to make really simple is to allow things that are necessary. Good change. So let's say hypothetically you or someone on the team is looking for remote access help from a vendor. We can make sure that only the appropriate things actually transpire. And it's as simple as this. I can say I need this for remote help with dental software, just to give you a solid example. So we'll fire that request off. And the team can be alerted very quickly via text message, email, or directly via the ticketing system that's being leveraged. But that's where we strive to really simplify the process. We're going to arm David and the team with all the information they need to make sure that software is actually legitimate. So automatically, you'll notice we see any digital certificates, all the information about the file, anything about the user. So you're not asking any questions at all. But most beneficial here on this screen is the fact that it matches a threat locker built in. That's just letting you know right away. We've already validated the integrity of the software. So this is where the simple controls come in place. We can decide to block that if necessary, or we can permit it. But we can be really granular. I can say this application can only run for an hour if necessary, and that's it. A day, whatever we choose, but we can make it really flexible. Only that machine. Or if there's a group of machines that vendor has to remote into, we can allow that access temporarily. So this is where the automation comes in. If you think back to any type of management with something like Active Directory, it's really time consuming because of the amount of steps and layers you have to go through. But because our threat locker agents run on every single endpoint, no matter which network they're connected to, if they're VPN'd in or just disconnected from the internet altogether, the protections are always in place. So you'll notice TeamViewer is set, and I get an alert letting me know I can leverage the software, and we're right back in. I'm now allowed to run TeamViewer because it's something that's been vetted and it's necessary. So we have command and control in that respect. So wanted to pause there, see if you guys had any questions about the approval process.
It, I don't think that we've got any questions, but I just wanted to reiterate, right? We put the agents, we install them in a monitor only mode, right? We're not providing any disruption, simply on the side, taking notes of all the application data, all that are being accessed, being utilized. Same with your network shares. We're mapping that as well. We come back here and it's your choice of which of these applications that you would want to continue to make available to your users. And those that don't need to be there, we just shut it down, right, Colin? Turn off the policy. By turning that policy off, it cannot be accessed. No longer can it function in your environment. So this is how we whittle away down to get that whitelist of what is necessary for your employees, your users, to perform their job. And by doing so, not only are we protecting, but we've got more than it'd be surprising to you, I think, the amount of feedback about increased productivity. Because if you think about it, they can't access Angry Birds every time the boss isn't looking. They've only got the applications necessary to run their business. Therefore, hey, I'll just continue to work. So, but that's the front end piece. We wanted to show you the process of how a user would request permission, what that looks like on the back end, what's available. We just crack that application open, look at all of the data behind it, and then from there, a decision can be made. And within 30 seconds, you approve or deny, especially approve, your user can then run that application that quick.
30 seconds is an impressive response time. No,
Yes.
I'm just joking, but I have to say, it's the most sophisticated solution to that delicate balance between security and ease of use, right? And particularly when you talk, for years, we've been doing least privilege. We're doing some pretty big, tightly controlled organizations, but well, we don't want to do it because what if they need access to this, go-to webinar, whatever it is. This is the nicest, easiest solution that I've ever seen for that, and for privilege escalation in a controlled manner.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And yeah, it's very, it's scalable, and it's flexible, and it's timely.
And that's the idea, guys. We have a solid understanding of the typical tools being used across the board. So things like browsers, Office, Firefox, even those meeting tools, Zoom, like we're on right this second. We get to make sure that they are allowed to run from day one, but they're still protected. And this is where we get into the real differentiator with ThreatLocker and really any other security tools. Because whitelisting, that nature of default deny, has always existed. We've just really automated that, made it very manageable. But the real differentiator here is what we call ring fencing. And I'll have a few examples to show you guys. And this first one should definitely resonate quite a bit. From a security perspective, we spend a lot of time doing security awareness training, stepping you guys through best practices to make sure that, hey, if someone sends a bad email or sends you a bad file, you're not clicking on things unnecessarily. But what if we say, from a best practice perspective, we can make sure that you never have to worry about those type of things? So we'll start with Microsoft Office. So one of the benefits of our built-in policies as well, we know every single thing that makes up Microsoft Office. PowerPoint, Word, Excel, Outlook, we've already validated everything about that software. But more importantly, we get to make sure it doesn't get weaponized. And what I mean by that is this. 9 times out of 10 in a spear phishing campaign, the goal is for an attacker is to get one person in your organization to click one bad link. And this is what we say to that attacker or any instance like that. No matter what end users logged in, if they're a domain admin, a standard user, it doesn't matter what permissions are set to them. We get to make sure that we're always protecting the user and the environment. So as a really simple example here, we say all the time in security awareness training, hover over those links just to validate that they are what they say they are. But the difference in time it takes for someone to really pay attention to click through a link versus clicking on this bad link in the document, you'll get a pop-up that says you probably shouldn't open this. But in this day and age, everyone is really busy. Time is of the essence. So that erroneous click could be the difference between your environment being secure and the end of your company, essentially, from a data perspective. But what we get to say here is simple. Under no circumstances should our accounting department, our sales department be using something like PowerShell in a way that could cause detriment to the company. So if the attempt is made, that's all it is, guys. It's an attempt because the end result is us blocking that bad behavior. And that's the big differentiator. We don't judge things whether they're good or bad. We only allow the behavior and actions that are necessary. And ring fencing is something you get from day one. We want to arm every single partner of ours with those best practice policies. So it's not a question as to if your environment is being protected. You have all of them from the very beginning. You'd be surprised as to the amount of time something like Google Chrome or Internet Explorer would call out to those command line and administrative tools. So Steve was mentioning the pipeline attack. Having ThreatLocker on that machine, we're stopping that attack in so many ways. What we say is simple. Even if you're an administrator and your administrator account gets compromised, we can make sure the environment is still protected. A question I pose to all of my partners is really simple. As the MSP now, how can you guarantee that your accounts can't be the detriment to your clients? And this is how we back our MSPs up. So in this case, something like PowerShell is automatically allowed to run on every single Windows system. So if the user is smart enough or the attacker is smart enough and they're able to gain access to the machine, if it's through bad software or just compromising the user accounts for one of your clients or one of your users, I should say, we get to make sure that nothing bad happens. So this is one of my favorite examples because of that fact. We're going to dive into a command prompt window. And you notice I'm not even running command prompt as an admin, but it's still allowed to be opened. That this is with every single tool, period. But the biggest difference is how these tools are allowed to behave. So this code is very simple. It's going to have PowerShell try and comb through all of my documents and then upload that to something like google.com. So when we talk about compliance and we talk about data flow and you being able to say explicitly what's necessary, we mean that. So you'll notice from a policy perspective, we do not allow these administrative tools to access our data. Why is PowerShell talking to your backups? Why is PowerShell looking at your critical customer files? It's never been necessary, so it shouldn't be allowed at this point. And that's what we say. So you notice it's not allowed to read and write, and that's the end result. If PowerShell is attempting to do anything malicious in my environment, it's automatically blocked because we've already determined what's necessary. So just a second, you'll be able to see the end result of that.
Yeah. Yep. So ring fencing is we're cutting off the paths of exfiltration, right? They're getting on, like I mentioned, they're getting on somehow, and they're running to PowerShell, C-script, and those like tools. But we're controlling that. We're not allowing them to communicate, to be taken hostage, if you will. By doing so, it's a very elementary, very logical approach. But Danny Jenkins, our CEO, is the first one to create it and bring it to market. There you go, Colin. I can see it.
Perfect. Yep. And from here, you'll notice we say PowerShell is still allowed to run under the circumstance that it's doing the things that are necessary. I have a ShareX environment set up here, and you'll notice right away, give me 1 second, looks like my VM. Perfect. So you'll notice right away that it's trying to come through backups, but the end result is a ring fencing block because we've already determined that it shouldn't have access to that key data. And this is going to be an amazing segue because this is how we talk about file integrity monitoring and control. If a user, a specific application, or a random piece of software is touching any file, we get to see explicitly how it's doing that. So when we talk about that forensic nature of the system, you get to hold every end user accountable for their actions, every piece of software accountable. You know the difference between something like PowerShell trying to delete a file. The trying is the key there. The end result is a block. Because if I go back to my documents directory, that ShareX folder is intact and nothing is allowed to overwrite it because, again, we've already told the system what's necessary.
That's right. Yep. Yep. Ring fencing is how we stopped Emotet, how we stopped WannaCry, and why CNN and Forbes, along with the local Fox affiliate, reached out to our CEO about a different approach. And he said, I'm 100% sure we would have stopped that pipeline hack in its tracks. The reason being, he utilizes a code very similar to one that was used to exfiltrate the data, lock down the data as the pipeline hack. By using ring fencing, not allowing those tools to be hijacked, it's neutralized.
And the last piece of value I'll add there is this behavior looks like good behavior. Your MSPs uses PowerShell command prompt to handle automation, do your patching. So when an AV tool looks at something like PowerShell executing commands, it's allowed. But you'll notice it's going to a website that it shouldn't be touching in the first place. A lot of times, even if you guys have a DNS filter, that behavior is still allowed because there's nothing on the planet that looks at a Google domain as something malicious, so bad behavior gets allowed. But we don't judge things whether they're good or bad. We're only going to allow the things that are necessary, so you're just protected indefinitely.
Right. So,
And
yeah, go ahead, Colin.
And now we get to kind of dive into the storage control side of the house. We get to see a lot of data, see who's attempting to do things, but with that visibility, we have control. So I have a few policies I'll show you here, but things are going to be really simplified from a security perspective. If you're dealing with things like QuickBooks shares or a backup share, we can say, even if it's present on the network and everyone has access to it, unless you're using a certified tool or you are a VIP user, then you can have that access. So even if you plug your computer directly into the machine itself, the server itself, you can't access any of those files. So that becomes really simple when you think about it. Why would we allow anything outside of QuickBooks to actually access the critical data? Why would we allow anything outside of your line of business tools to access that critical data? So we get to lock those things down as we see fit. But my favorite part about this is how granular that control can get. A lot of you guys will have a public share where your team is allowed to store and save critical files in the same respect. We can make sure that none of those files can be deleted, taken from the environment in any capacity that isn't necessary. So Steve was mentioning USB control. Any external devices we choose, if you are required to protect PII and PHI, you get to make sure none of that data can leave the system in a way that isn't authorized from day one. We make those things really simple. So as a quick example there, you'll notice any file in my documents directory, I can try to copy it over to a USB. But so far, the only thing we allowed to move from the system to a USB device are images. And just like that, we get to make sure that's the only thing that can ever leave. You'll notice even if I try to use administrative credentials and authenticate myself, the end result is still a block because we've already determined that that data should not leave the system in any form that isn't authorized. Oh, give me 1 second. So even admins, we get to make sure that if anyone gets compromised on the team, that your data is not at stake. It's always protected. And that's the idea.
Right.
So moving back to the portal from a visibility perspective, this is where we marry visibility with control. You guys get to see everything taking place and you really get to dictate what's necessary.
Right.
I love that feature, Colin and Steve, because once the hacker gets a hold, they're going to try to elevate their rights and they're going to gain those capabilities. Or if they can gain access as an admin, then no matter what you're doing with all the different levels of protection, yours is one of the only products and solutions that controls that data access and exfiltration at the application level and at the individual basis, even if they have the authenticated rights to do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I haven't seen a data loss prevention product as clear cut, as simple, but powerful as this, right? It gives granular control and really granular visibility.
And that's why I posted that in the text as well, because some different compliance things and sometimes cybersecurity insurance will ask you about data loss prevention. And this is the best qualifying tool that I've seen to do that.
Yeah.
All of the other ones are a struggle.
Yeah. And, you know, our USB is a real strong differentiator too. It's very powerful. USB drives are necessary, right? But they're also a point of entry for bad things, right? Whether someone just picks up a USB and plugs it in, hey, I found it in the parking lot. That actually happens. To other more malicious intentions, the idea is to do the same thing here. Who has access to use it? We can control everything from can they read and write, what kind of file types, to the specific users that are allowed to do it. They can request, or you can shut that down. Very granular. I think Colin's going to walk through it here for you.
Mhm. So yeah, on that USB control front, you can see clearly we can only allow encrypted ones. And getting down to the file type, like Steven's mentioning, well, in that last example, I said only 3 image types: PNGs, JPEGs, GIFs. You can allow videos if you choose, but the goal there is just to show you how flexible we can be. And most importantly, any USBs that you guys would like to allow, we can build policies around them individually. We get to track them by serial numbers. And that's really where the visibility takes us to another level. It's going to be this reporting. So Steve gave us some good examples with things like priority, productivity, who's been accessing certain files and certain data. And the reports make that a really simple thing to account for. So my favorite one to actually show off is that productivity report. You can see exactly which users are leveraging what applications, but the biggest differentiator here is the amount of times that they're actually running those apps. So you get to see people who are gaming, spending time outside of doing things that really benefit the business, and we can automatically curve that behavior. Let's say you're comfortable with them using certain apps, you get to put those things on a schedule so they can do it outside of work hours if you choose. But that's where the visibility really comes in.
Yeah. Yeah, working outside the perimeter, having visibility. Are they working? Are they doing everything that's necessary to perform their job functions? Well, now you've got a little insight into what they're accessing. You know, with our solution in place, this won't happen. You can remove them, put them outside of your whitelist. Anything not on the whitelist is blocked by default, and therefore no longer accessible to them, right?
That's a question that comes up from customers many times over the years.
Yeah.
And it gets a little bit on the ethical side. How much do you want to control and watch exactly what everybody's doing, when it's corporate equipment, right? But it's still, different managers have different feelings about it. But it's nice. It's pretty awesome that it's included in this tool as a security tool, that you gain the visibility to see that even on the basic level of reporting for the users and how they're spending their time.
Yeah.
There is
Absolutely.
one question in the chat that I'd like to address, if I might.
Yes.
And that is, as a user, what do we have to do in order to run this tool? And I'm going to give my answer, but Steve and Colin, let me know if there's anything else, because my answer is pretty much the same as I say to my customer when deploying any software, is you don't have to do much except to help and be cooperative. Understand that it's happening and communicate with us and our team to any anomalies or any questions that you might have as they come up. Everything else gets taken care of because we deploy it in listen-only mode as we learn your applications. You have anything to add to that, Colin or Steve?
I do. Yeah, you don't have to do anything, quite frankly, except when you try and access something and you're denied, and it's a tool that you need, go ahead and launch that request permission. It's going to go to David. David's got all these tools right here that we've shown you today. Oh, yep, that's good. That's safe. It matches. It's a built-in application. Threatlocker has verified it. They update it. And in fact, other users in your group, yep, go ahead, Bob, you can use that. And in 30 seconds, Bob's now, not only can he use it, but we have the ability to let Bob do the installation himself. No longer do you have to find an admin on site. Just with a simple click of a button from David's side allows Bob to do the installation themselves. But yeah, that's just goes right in, right, participate, right? So, hey, and if it's not, that's another thing. If you have, you try and pull something up, it's denied, ask yourself and the users, is this something that is necessary to do my business? And what we're finding is that a lot of people say, you know what, I don't want to request permission. Never mind. I don't need to go to Facebook, right? So that kind of leads itself to the whole argument of increased productivity. So, and there's one thing I did want to bring about the USB. It's important to note, if you have a deny policy in place for a user, it doesn't mean we shut down the USB drive completely. Let's say someone needs to plug in just a standard printer, use a USB drive as it's intended. It will still function. Once you insert something into that USB drive that has storage capabilities, then we manage it. Then it's on us, right? That's another differentiator. Yep, if you need Facebook for your business, then it's an approved application. We're not judging good or bad. We're judging necessary and not necessary.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because that's where the roles come in. Your marketing department will be using social media heavily to promote the business. We can make sure that's accommodated for while not giving that explicit control out to anyone else. So that's what it's about. You have visibility into everything. You can approve what's necessary and just limit everything else. So the important thing here that I'd like to stress from a policy perspective is this. Attackers understand that even with whitelisting, again, you have a list of tools that they can identify and determine what they can try and attack. But the benefit of this is, regardless of what tool it is, we've already put the control in play. So think back, a lot of companies being exploited because of the exchange vulnerability. It's bad code coming from the vendors themselves. There's not much you can do about that, in the sense where, well, if they make code that's vulnerable, you typically would just have to allow it to go through its motion. You would have to wait on Microsoft to push out updates, release press statements, but we want to protect everything in advance, even if something like Google Chrome gets compromised. And that's the big if. Who's next? What other vendor is going to be
Right.
targeted? What other piece of software will they try and make a mess of? And that's where we come in place to say, regardless of any software, period, we've already put the policies in place to protect our data, protect your users. And that's really the end of the discussion, because we're not judging those things whether they're good or bad. And that's the biggest difference. Attackers have always been ahead because we watch their exploits and then learn about them after the fact.
Right.
So you can protect yourself post exploit, but what happens when they do something brand new?
Yeah, I work with a MSP in the Midwest, and he's awfully country. And he said, it just makes more sense. Leave that stuff out on the porch. Don't bring it in the house and try and figure out if it's going to burn it down. Leave it on the porch. And he's right. He's absolutely right. If it doesn't need to run, we leave it out. If it doesn't need to interact with those Windows tools, we don't allow it to. So, Colin, another report that I really love is when it comes to who's accessing those network shares, those honeyholes of data location. To me, this is valuable, extremely valuable, because ultimately we are trying to stop the encryption and exfiltration of data, right? This is that last line of defense. It would probably be helpful to know who and what is trying to access that. There aren't a lot of tools give you that in real time. This is a 30-day running audit. So in 30 days, if someone touches, moves, copy, or deletes a file, we know it. And this is where you see it.
Yep. And as a good example, so for my network share, just so you guys can have the explicit visibility here, the only thing that I've allowed, just for the environment's sake, is Microsoft Office. The Office suite can read and write to this network share. So any application outside of Microsoft Office that attempts to do that, if they try to access any of that data, it gets blocked because it doesn't have the permission to. So that's how we deal with the human element. That's how we deal with ransomware. Even if something bad gets allowed, at the very last layer, you have storage control that dictates, well, you don't have access to that data, so you can never open it. But you'll notice I can open that file just fine to make sure that the appropriate tools have that access. So that's a great example, Steve, that network share piece, being able to really show you what tools and applications are touching that data ahead of time. You get to start checking those boxes off when it comes to compliance right away.
I have to say that I know some accounts where I could sell this product solely on that feature of who moved the file or the folder. Why did this folder disappear from the marketing department again, right?
Again.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually had said that. I said this could be a very strong standalone DLP or data loss prevention product of itself, but we threw it in there because it's a core layer, in my opinion. This is the most important layer from my perspective. We control those applications. We make it really easy. Ring fencings, hey, guess what? You're going to click. Your guys are never going to have 100% on security awareness training. The storage control is that last gatekeeper. We get visibility in it and tight controls. So.
Yep, and as you see, as soon as I try to access that share with Notepad, it gets addressed right away. So real-time data that you'll have to leverage across the board.
Right. And I think there was a question about, we see the user, we see their activity. Once a user, if they have, and they must have access, right? If they're locked out, they can't do it, which is part of the solution. Should they have access, we know exactly what they did. And here's all of the forensic information at your fingertips.
Perfect. So you'll see here, we can really just search by username. I actually have it up already. So individual users, you get to see what they're doing, the automation that happens on the back end, because we sit at such a tight level. We sit at the kernel level. So we get to see even the automation that the system itself is trying to hit with.
Right.
And then you saw my admin user earlier. So if I tried to do anything with my colin.admin, this is how easy it is to search individual people, individual computers, any timestamps. You get to see everything across the board.
Yeah. Can you expand on one of those incidences just to show a little bit more data that's there?
Yep. I'll give you the get audit history here.
Perfect.
So perfect. This is going to be an example of the read and write access. So you'll notice get audit history coming from that E drive, it's blocked because I've said, well, nothing is allowed to read and write to USBs. We haven't given that permission. The only thing that can will be the images. So you get to see when those things are allowed. So that's where the granularity comes in. If I search my Colin.user here, I can say simply, instead of anything else, I just like to see every single file that he attempted to delete or deleted. And you get to see them explicitly. But this is the biggest difference. It's not a deletion that was allowed to happen because we denied untrusted access to our network shares. So this is the user trying to move files automatically. It's just blocked because that's a policy we have in place. It's never allowed to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So that is storage control. That's our product. And, 10,000-foot view, threw a lot at you quickly just to show you the power of the product. But, we feel like the time is now and we are growing exponentially. We did last year in a challenging year for everyone, which I think speaks to this technology. Personally, like I mentioned at the outset of the call, 20+ year vet in IT. I came from an antivirus company, a major AV company. Once I saw this technology, met the CEO, had discussions, and I thought I need to be a part of that. This is the future of cybersecurity. And quite frankly, I wasn't believing in what I was selling anymore of AV, right? How could you? This is a different way. And I'm just going to go back to the first thing I said when I began speaking. The NSA, Microsoft are announcing, please take this approach. All federal networks have to have a zero trust component to it by 2024. Anybody that's playing with CMMC regulations, that's federal government, boy, they're being pushed since that pipeline hack to move faster. So this is an enterprise class solution that is finally available and consumable by the mid-market, SMB to mid-market space. Historically, only the largest of enterprises that had a huge budget and an army of technicians could deploy and manage a solution like this. No longer. There are, and David spoke about the 1,000+ technicians. We're part of that team. We have a team 24/7, 365, around the clock. We have a 45-second answer rate. So should there be a problem, David's got us in his back pocket. So yeah, we're happy to be part of that. So Colin, did I miss anything? Anything else that you'd like to add?
I think the only other thing worth merit here is control over Chrome extensions,
Yes.
browser add-ons. So that is always going to be a big piece in any compliance conversation, you being able to make sure, again, your data isn't affected by unnecessary applications. And this is more so just a flex, if I would say. So from the Chromium side of the house, we give you these from day one. So if I could just hit the right thing here, give me 1 second.
Yep.
Perfect. So when it comes to add-ons, browsers, anything of that nature, if I could spell, you'll notice we account for a lot of those add-ons themselves. From a Google Chrome perspective, Firefox perspective, we did the work of identifying the majority of those extensions out there, so you get to easily control them. So one thing I always like to show off, because from a compliance perspective, anything running in those browsers has all the access that the user logged in has. So we give you those controls at that level automatically.
Right. Yeah, that's surprising, right? Not everyone knows that's in fact the case. So yeah, the Chrome extensions can be very helpful, but also a nightmare to try and manage. Once again, our team offloads most of that on behalf of our clients. So should you see in there something that you want or you don't want, all you have to do a couple of clicks of the button, you can provide access or you can deny it. It's that quick. So
Awesome. Great job, guys. I really appreciate it.
yeah, well, that's Threatlocker, David. You know it. Yeah. And we're happy to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to present to anyone. I want to open the floor, if you think it's okay, some more direct
Please,
questions.
if there's any participants that are on the webinar that have questions, please enter them into the chat, which you should be allowed to do. I'm going to just bring up a kind of the closing screen for us, at Rose Computers. If you haven't already checked out our 2-minute video, it's at VBM, not Rose CTS, because we're advertising on Vermont Business Magazine. We're going to have the back page next month. And I do want to put in a little chip for our next event, which is another form of protection, particularly for HIPAA clients, which is Safe Harbor, right? What we're seeing today with Threatlocker is a fantastic way with data loss prevention and to really lock everything down. Then this is another approach, because if they can somehow exfiltrate your data, it's encrypted. So please join us for that webinar as well. Give us any feedback you can on Facebook or LinkedIn at the sites that are listed here. And if you have any interest in the Threatlocker, just reach out to me at my email, drose@rosects.com. Be glad to set up a demonstration or quote out upgrading your account to have this new capability.
Yep. The time is now.
Let's see.
Time is now.
Anything else in the chat? I can't see the chat. I don't see anything else. So with that, we'll wrap up a couple of minutes early. Colin and Steve, thank you so much. I value your partnership, and it's going to enable us to help protect our customers. Thanks so much.
You got it. Thank you, David. Thank you, Bill.
Have a great day, everybody.
Yep. Everyone, thank you for joining us. We appreciate your